Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 2. So, going into this one, I guess there might be some there might be some, like me going in and doing some rebuttal, meaning, and saying that evidently I ill-pronounced Fennec's name throughout most of the first review whenever I was to talk about her. Shand, I think I called her Chan through the whole thing. So eventually, Fennec is probably what I'll just easily call her, just because I'm getting used to these names, or I'm getting reused to them, if they were ever to be, of course, in The Mandalorian. We have, of course, the Mayor Domo, that guy who, of course, was to be asking for tribute, and the only tribute is to just have the mayor's assistant just show up and be like, hey, give me money, like that guy. We have him, of course, coming into this episode, but we have, of course, some either CGI'd or some interesting approaches in this episode. We have a number of Easter eggs, because this show just becomes, instead of it just being a Star Wars show, it just becomes like, oh my god, all the Easter eggs, oh my god, to where everybody has to kind of figure out everything that's to be like little tiny slivers of like, oh my god, they're going to bring up the Rancor, they're going to bring up this character, they're going to bring up that, oh my god, does anybody remember about this tiny little snippet of something that they never used and now they're using it here, oh my god. That's this kind of show, which, hey, if anybody busted a nut, so to speak, on the very first episode, in this episode, they're like, man, I want there to be more Easter eggs. I'm sorry if that is to offend anybody, but, like, man, this show is just Easter Egg City. They have to continue to reference so many things that are to having people go on and be like, oh my god, I have to showcase this, I have to showcase certain people's back history, and so on, and like, we start to get where almost every, like, breakdown or Easter egg thing almost kind of sounds one and the same, or somebody who didn't cover something in the first episode are turning around and covering it here, and that's just a thing, something that slipped their mind or they forgot about. So, without a doubt, I'm hopefully going to get into every one of these names and hopefully get into all these characters, but at the end of the day also, I just hope that I don't F something up. So, with that said, I'm enjoying this episode. It's kind of a cool down episode, because last week was just so like, oh my god, and people are probably still poking through that first episode to try to find all of the things that they missed, and so they've probably seen that a number of times to just kind of like be like, ooh, now we caught something here that we didn't catch before. And so now in this episode we're kind of like getting a cool down and just be like, okay, let's get into the other parts of this, let's get into, and plus also there's probably going to be a delay for, like, I'm sure about, like, the third episode, it's gonna, like, the show's gonna really pick up, because they're just kind of waiting for people to, like, see all the ads for the Book of Boba Fett, get interested in the show, and so there's kind of a delay here about getting people into this, because people will probably like, when did that show come out? Oh, now? Alright, great. So let's go into it. So, we, of course, from the last episode, have both Fennec and Boba Fett going and taking out these assassins. And so we, of course, have one of these assassins being left alive to be dragged back to, of course, Jabba's palace. Which, now that Jabba is technically gone, shouldn't they rename that by now? They're, like, everybody's still calling it Jabba's palace. Wouldn't it be nice if they called it the Fett Fort or something like that? Like, since he has, like, this place now, like the Boba Palace or so, I don't know. Anyways, so we go on and we have this assassin that does not want to really reveal who he is. And so we have the 8D8 who, of course, is to talk about this guy. And because we end up finding out that this guy is to be a part of the Assassins of the Nightwind, and whatever that means. And so now they're wanting to know who his employer is, and now we are, of course, to use this chair to its real benefit that Boba Fett is to have, because this assassin is to be dumped into this pit where he is to be waiting for a Rancor to show up and attack him. And so we now end up having the Nightwind assassin. That's what I wrote. The Nightwind. I'm already feeling gassy. Like, every single time I have to say this person's name. So the Nightwind is to mention that the mayor had sent him here. And so it's like, okay, all right. Like, so we're getting information here. And so we end up thinking that there's a Rancor coming to kill this guy regardless. But Fennec is to tell us that there is no Rancor down there because the Rancor had died. And also that there seems to be not much of a substitute Rancor. But I'm just waiting for there to be a later thing where we're expecting there not to be a Rancor down there or something down there. And then all of a sudden, something is to come out of there. Possibly in the later episodes where we're kind of expecting nothing to be down there. And then all of a sudden, something's there. Maybe in a later season. Who knows? So, we go on and, of course, have Boba Fett with this Nightwind assassin, going back to schedule an appointment for the mayor to talk to him now because he is not going to wait. Well, do you have an appointment, sir? And they're like, we're going to talk to him now. Like, well, and so the mayor domo just says, like, okay, come on, speak to the mayor. And so we have, of course, Boba Fett talking to this mayor, who, of course, is a Ithorian. And so he's Mayor Mock Shays. And weirdly enough, we end up having, like, people mentioning that this guy who does the voice for the mayor is also doing another voice for their show. Great. Like, of course people would, because if you're a voiceover actor, you would, of course, want to just do as many voices as possible. And plus, also, if any number of these things become action figures, then you're like, yeah! Like, I have an action figure of myself, because technically I did the voice of this character. Because a lot of people have that kind of thing about them, that they love the fact that they are to be technically lending their voice to a character that eventually becomes some kind of action figure or something, and they collect it because that's them. There's some people that don't give a and that's sad. So we have, of course, Boba wanting to go on and hand back over this assassin and ask why he had, of course, Boba's to ask why he had wanted to sick these assassins on them, the mayor. And so we have the mayor, of course, going on and denying the fact that he was to go on and send these people. And so really there's nothing for Boba to do at this point. And so he just kind of walks off because it's like, well, of course you're going to deny this. Even though this Nightwind assassin is telling me otherwise. So we're going to see how that plays out. So of course we go on here and we have both Boba Fett, Finnick, and the two Gamorreans going on to the Twi'lek bar, where they're going to re-meet up with Garza, Flip, and she of course is like strangely sweating, which we don't actually see her sweating at all. And Boba Fett is like, well, hey, you're sweating. Um, like, why are you so nervous about things? And so Garza is to mention about the Jabba the Hutt's cousins. The twins are coming, and so Bubba's like, the twins aren't coming. Like, come on. So all of a sudden, we end up having, of course, Jabba's cousins, who are twins that are to come into town, being being dragged in here by a litter. Uh, Funny enough, in the first episode, we have Fennec who is telling Boba, it's like, well, hey, you should come in here via a litter and like have these guys kind of carry you through the town. And Boba Fett's like, no, like I can walk. Like I would want, of course, to be like treated like a common person and not better than anybody. But like the Jawas are of course very different, because why would they want to make their way too much of anywhere? Um, so we still see like heavily CGI'd like Javas here or huts here, and like from a distance they look awful, but once we get close up they technically look better. But still, I'm just like, man, could we come up with some kind of better CGI for these huts? Like, come on. Like, we're still using the same CGI from the other Star Wars movie, because I guess we just have to just have that same kind of look on them. But I'm like, man, the Jabba the Hutt from the one Star Wars movie still looks nothing like these characters, because the Jabba the Hutt looks way bigger. And plus, also, when they did Jabba the Hutt later on in some CGI like thing, I'm like, this looks nothing like the same Jabba the Hutt that we're seeing. Um, and still here, we're still seeing the same approach. So we of course have one Hutt that is going and like wiping his head with a live rat weirdly. And while they're also having the speech here, we consistently see certain alien-like characters. I think one of them is to look like the Bosk character that I ended up mentioning from before, but it's not that actual person. But there is kind of the same kind of aliens that they keep recycling and using, because I guess they like, hey man, we have all this just sparing stuff that we're just chucking it out. And we also, while Boba Fett and Fennec were at this bar, we go on and still have the Cantina band just kind of like, man, are they still getting their work in? Luckily for them. So we go on and we have the Hutts that are telling, of course, Boba here that like this place is ours, that palace is theirs, because like they should inherit that. And Boba is just telling these Hutts to go back to their homeland, and like because Boba is to cement like that he is to, of course, like take control of this place. So the Hutts go on and they showcase a Wookiee character called Black Kransta. Kransta? Chrysantan? Black Chrysantan? 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 Sure. Who is to be, of course, a Wookiee that is to have blackened hair, which I'm like, ooh, this character looks really interesting. And we actually have seen him before in one of the other like Star Wars movies. So like this is a character that is familiar, but like we really barely, if we watched a certain film at a certain point, like this of course is a guy who is another he's a Wookiee bounty hunter. We have Boba Fett that calls him a gladiator. Weirdly, I guess for like people to now be forced to figure out who this guy out was, because they just call him a gladiator here. I'm like, what the is this? Uh, like I'm so happy though about having a Wookiee who's a bounty hunter that they use here. Just because I was thinking, I'm like, well, I'm kind of hoping that we kind of bring things to light that are to like make certain characters more important or just kind of change up certain things and have us kind of look into things, which is kind of cool. So, but we don't have the Wookiee go and fight both Fennec or Boba Fett here. We're just kind of presenting that they have this bounty hunter, and it's like, whoopee, like, go back to your home because you guys aren't going to be, like, you guys aren't going to even try to go up against Boba Fett. Like, come on. Like, go away. Go away. So, we go on and we now transition to a flashback because, of course, uh, we have Boba going back into his of course uh, his hibernation chamber thing, his bantha chamber. So we have, of course, him having another flashback of him being with the Tusken Raiders, and we have them going on. And so in this episode, we have, of course, Boba, who's getting trained by the Tusken Raiders to use their kind of weapons. That, of course, is to uh, be called a. Oh my God, I didn't have the. Let me pause here for 1 second. Gaddafi stick thing. So they go on and we have Boba Fett here, like training to use his staff, and he's not holding it right. And Boba Fett's like, I'm holding it right. And they're like, no. So he starts to learn the technique. And so, but we go on here and we, of course, have this train that keeps passing by with these, of course, guys who are to be the these characters called Pikes, who, of course, to have some narcotic spices, like drug spices. And so we go on here and we have these Pikes who go on, and every time they are to see the Tusken Raiders, they go in and shoot these Tusken Raiders. Because if you are to know from before, when they did the pod racing thing, we had the Tusken Raiders trying to shoot, of course, the pod racers from episode 1. And so that's why it justifies these Pikes going and shooting these Tusken Raiders, so that way they don't damage their train. And so I guess that makes a lot of sense to consistently try to blast and shoot down these guys because they don't want their train to be damaged. So, and a bantha, the of course animal that these guys are riding on, eventually gets killed in the process, and so we end up having like Boba Fett like hiding behind this dead bantha and just kind of like seeing where everything is playing out. So we go on and we of course have Boba Fett, who goes on to a place called the Tashi Station, which is to really just be a bar where he is to go into this bar to retrieve these speeder bikes from these from the swoop bike gang, which of course they are to actually be Niktos, a bunch of Niktos. And so while at this bar, we end up seeing two characters here that I guess were from a Star Wars movie once before, but like never got to the real film. Like they were in some kind of deleted scene somewhere, is from what I heard about these characters, because I guess they were to be used, and now that they are to just be used on the show, so I guess they have some tying in with Luke Skywalker that we'll find out somewhere down the road. Sure. So we end up having these characters, Cammy and Lays, who are going on and watching as Boba Fett is to slay this biker gang and to take them out using his Gaddafi weapon. Um, and so we, of course, go on and we have Boba Fett drinking this drink and then leaving this bar. But really, the real reason why Boba Fett had stepped in is because we have uh, Lays here going on and getting into a fight with these characters, and so Boba Fett kind of steps in and defends him. And so we go on and we have now Boba Fett stepping in and fighting off these guys to get their speeder bikes. So Boba Fett goes on and ties all these speeder bikes together, and you would have thought that, like, then Boba Fett would have realized, like, hey man, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. No, he decides instead to go on and help further the Tusken Raiders, because I guess it's a nice thing to do. So we go on and we have now Boba Fett going and training these guys on how to use these speeder bikes. And so there's kind of a learning gap there. They're trying to learn how to drive these things. The Tusken Raiders are still having like some learning to do. And so now we end up having Boba Fett that's teaching them how to leap from one bike to the other, so that way they can get used to it, because they're going to have to jump onto this train to seek out this merchandise. So we now go on and have this bike or this train pass along again. And so now the Tusken Raiders are ready this time to go and kind of speeder bike alongside them. A lot of people will probably remember these speeder bikes being used when Anakin was to go and try to go and find his mother. Like, there's so many references really to like these speeder bikes being used, especially with God, what was it, like episode 6 with the whole Ewoks and Luke and Leia kind of using these things to kind of like go through the forest and try to take down these one troopers and so on and so forth. But like, really, the one that I best remember these speeder bikes being used is when Anakin was going and trying to find his mom with the Raiders, because I think that makes more sense. Anyways, so because it makes sense story-wise here, so it's kind of like a full circle kind of event. So we go on and we have now these guys desperately trying to jump onto this train, these Tuskens. So these Raiders, those guys. So we go on and we start to have them make it, but it seems that wherever we have these guys like blasting away and whatever, like they're getting pulled out of this train, all these pikes. And so it seems that no matter where they, like, these guys jump onto, we eventually have it where these pikes are to kind of pop out like they're freaking gophers on this train. So all of a sudden we have the one kind of Tusken Raider in black who is to kind of go through the train and take all of these Tuskens or all these pikes down, to where because we have kind of Boba who's kind of like stuck behind this one kind of opened hatch thing. He's kind of stuck behind that, while some of the other kind of Tuskens are kind of like starting to get killed off here. So we eventually have all the pikes being taken down and chucked out of this train. And so we go on and we have Boba, who goes all the way to the very front of this train, which I couldn't have been bothered to figure out what the droid's name of the conductor is of this train, because I couldn't have been bothered. So Boba goes on and is to try and stop this train because this train is going far too fast, and it feels like this train is also going to explode seemingly soon for how like hard they're pressing this train, and how when they get to the head of this train, we have at some points where they're kind of having to like be worried about the burst of flame coming out of the very top of this train. So we go on, and we of course have Boba, who stops this train by using his Gaddafi Gaddafi and trying to press against this to stop this train from moving. And when it stops the train from moving, it technically derails the train, and so this train is like sliding through the sands. So this train derails and is to eventually stop. And so now all the pikes that are left onto this train, Boba Fett is to ask them, like, hey, like, what did you have on this train? Like, what is the product that you're trying to move? And eventually they find out that it's drugged spice. And, like, he asks them if that's what they have, and they're like, meh. Like, they don't want to tell him that. So we go on, and we have at one point that there's to be, like, one of their cars is to be filled with water, and so the Tuskens are desperately like trying to get any kind of like buckets or like kind of containers that they can to try to catch this water, because I guess these pikes are to be relying a lot on water here, and so they're kind of worried that they might not make it back to their um, to their homes or to their like station or wherever they are to go. And so Boba is to be nice and like, well, hey, like I'll give you guys a bunch of like milk that should kind of help you guys to make it to your guys' place by sundown if you if you consistently walk a certain direction. So the guys all do what Boba Fett says, and they go on. So we now end up having it to where the Raiders are just like, oh my god, Boba Fett, like you're one of us now, and so like we've embraced you as one of ours, so you're gonna go ahead and you're now gonna go and get a lizard through your nose and get this dust sprayed in your face, and now this is gonna help guide you through your brain. And so Boba goes on and is to make his way to this one tree where he's getting all these flashbacks of his father going off to war um, or to battle at some point when he was a young kid. We have the flashbacks of Boba Fett getting out of the Sarlacc, and like all these kind of weird, goofy flashbacks of him just kind of being thrusted weirdly, I guess, still in the Sarlacc, weirdly. I don't know. It kind of gets a little trippy here. So now we have Boba Fett who gets like this tree that's starting to like make its branches and start to suffocate Boba at some point. To where eventually Boba is to break off one of these branches and bring it back to the Tusken Raiders. And they're like, oh, okay, so they take this branch and turn it into one of the Gaddafis. And so once they carve this weapon for him, well, technically he chiseled it and helps and whatever, but still. Then they go on and do this like celebratory dance to say that Boba Fett is one of them, and really that's just how the episode is to really just fizzle off here, with mainly just Boba Fett like seemingly being focused on him being one of the Tusken Raiders, and eventually we'll get back to all of that other stuff. Really a kind of a kind of cool down episode, but I think the next episode will probably be much more eventful because more than likely they're thinking like, okay, like it'll take some time for people to know that this show is going on, and so by the third episode we'll have some more like billions of Easter eggs for them to be intrigued by. So with that said, I am going to get out of here because I think that's all that I wanted to cover for this one, and this one actually was a lot uh, like it was a longer episode, but it was like a shorter amount of things to go on and talk about. Compared to the first episode where it's like, oh my god, this Easter egg, this blah, 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 and I didn't go further in through any of the other like Easter egg stuff from before. Like there's a droid in the background of that bar that is to supposedly be used in some uh like Disney ride somewhere that I couldn't have been bothered to mention. Because like what does that droid do for story? Nothing. Like he's just there to just like, oh yeah, like they have to justify this droid from some other Star Wars thing now here. So yeah, because I started to hear about all the tons and tons of Easter eggs when kind of now like hearing all these people talk about this stuff. And a lot of people like, man, like bravo to all these guys that mention all of this stuff, or maybe just kind of repeat stuff from other people. Like I would probably do the same thing, because I don't feel like I know 100% Star Wars. So if anything, I need to go and search and research and figure out certain names and whatever. And I'm sorry, I might have not have pronounced the Wookiee bounty hunter's name correctly. If anything, I do have the spelling of it. But yeah, Chrysanthemum. Anyways, yeah, of course I turned off my phone. Um, so yeah, well, once we start to get more familiar with that character, because this character might appear in other episodes, then we'll probably get to know the character a little bit more. I thought that was kind of messed up how we you would think for Star Wars they would immediately have certain names for things, simply because like I think they should tell people where places are, because like do we all just have to just know Star Wars stuff like, oh yeah, that definitely looks like Tatooine. Oh, that looks definitely like this place. Oh, that definitely looks like this character. Um, Chrysanthemum, 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 sure. Black Chrysanthemum. If I'm still even ballparkingly saying that correct. Chrysanthemum. I'm giving up. So with that said, uh, yeah. Bye, Ray. Bye, everybody.